Hey guys, today I'll be taking a look at the updated 538 forecast for this year's Senate elections. We are now just 2 months away from the midterms in November, and Democrats have hit a record high in their chances at maintaining a majority. There's now a 70% chance that the Democratic Party wins at least 50 seats in the upper chamber of Congress this year. This comes as Democrats continue to keep up the momentum that they have going for them nationwide. Looking at generic ballot numbers, Democrats are ahead by 1% after being behind for almost a year from late 2021 all the way until the summer of 2022. If we look at the approval rating of Joe Biden among likely and registered voters, Joe Biden currently is approved of by 44% of the country. And so this will boost Democratic candidates nationwide as well. If we look at the Senate map, though, this map should not be difficult for Republicans to win. They only have to make a net gain of one state to take back control. The Senate is currently split down the middle 50-50 after the 2020 Senate election. So if we look at the three easiest pickups for Republicans, they are in the states of Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia. All three of these states barely voted for Joe Biden in the 2020 presidential election, but despite this, the Republican Party is struggling in all three of these races. Not only that, but they're also having trouble holding on to the seat that they hold in Pennsylvania, and in three other races that they should be winning pretty easily in Wisconsin, Ohio, and North Carolina. These races are just as competitive as the states of Nevada and Georgia. So the GOP really is losing ground, and they have never been in as bad of a position as they're in right now, going back the last 2 years. And so looking at the updated forecast, like I said before, Democrats' odds have never been as high as they are right now. They started off when this forecast was first released with a 40% chance at controlling the Senate. They now have a 70% chance at winning. The odds went from plus 20 for the Republicans now to plus 40 for the Democrats. And Democrats right now are expected to win 51 seats, actually expanding upon the majority that they already have. And so the first state I want to look at closer on this new forecast is the state of Nevada. Catherine Cortez Masto has a 62% chance at winning her re-election here. In my opinion, Masto is the second most vulnerable Democrat on the ballot this November, only behind Raphael Warnock. So in this election, Adam Laxalt is the Republican challenger. He is the failed 2018 gubernatorial nominee, and so he does not have that great of a track record, really no major positions in the state of Nevada. But Catherine Cortez Masto is the first Latina senator in the entire country, and so that will help her with Hispanic voters. Hispanic voters obviously have been a voting bloc that has been very favorable to Democrats for a very long time, but they are starting to shift to the right as culture war issues become a bigger deal in politics. So Catherine Cortez Masto, she is probably going to win a majority of Hispanic votes simply because of her own ethnicity, and along with Steve Sisolak in a good position in the governor election as well, Masto's odds have continued to go up over the last 3 months. Currently, she's expected to win by a margin of 2.3%, almost identical to the margin that she had in 2016. If you look at the polling for this election, Masto currently leads by a margin of 3.8%. Basically, every single poll released in the last couple of months has shown Masto ahead. The only polls that have put Laxalt leading are polls conducted by Republican-sponsored pollsters. So Nevada will be the first state that we fill in on this map, and it will be lean Democratic. Now, moving on to Arizona, we have a race that is not nearly as competitive as it should be. Mark Kelly only won the special election in 2020 by 2.3% against Martha McSally, but since then, he now has a 77% chance at winning his first full term in office in 2022. Blake Masters, the Republican nominee, alongside Raphael Warnock in Georgia and Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania, is probably one of the worst Republican nominees on the ballot this year for any Senate election across the country, and that's why he has only less than a 1 in 4 chance at flipping this seat. Blake Masters should be doing much better considering the fact that he is a Republican in a state that Republicans won for over 20 years before Joe Biden flipped it in 2020. So Mark Kelly is a pretty popular senator. That's why he's in such a strong position. He is much more popular than Kyrsten Sinema, and if you look at how his odds have changed over time, very similar to the numbers we saw for Catherine Cortez Masto. He now has a 8 in 10 chance at winning his re-election, up from a 6 in 10 chance just a few months ago. And statistically, going from 60 to 80 is a very big deal. And if you look at the popular vote margin currently projected by 538, they currently believe that Mark Kelly is going to win re-election by a margin of 5%. I do think, though, that this is slightly too high. Mark Kelly is probably not going to break 4%. Remember, he only won by 2% 2 years ago, and in 2020, Democrats were in a much better position nationwide. But as the incumbent, Mark Kelly Kelly will have a slight advantage just from the fact that he is now running for a second term. If you look at the polling, though, Mark Kelly does lead by 7.8%. This is definitely impressive, but polls in Arizona have been known to overestimate Democrats, so I do not think that he's actually going to win by margins similar to what the polling may suggest. Even the most recent Trafalgar Group poll shows Mark Kelly leading by 3%. I do think in the end, though, this poll will actually be pretty accurate. If you do look at the spread of all the polls, though, Mark Kelly has led in every single poll for his cycle this year. He is not going to lose his re-election. 530 gives him a at least 3 in 4 chance at winning, and so Arizona is going to be our first likely Democratic state, and this will put a big wrench in the GOP's plans in terms of trying to win back the majority. So Nevada is going to be the first state we fill in, and it will be lean Democratic. Now, moving on to Arizona, we have a Senate election that is much less competitive than it should be. Mark Kelly only won his first term in 2020 in the special election by 2.3%, and now he is running for his first full term in office for the next 6 years. So Mark Kelly has a 77% chance at winning this election. Blake Masters has a less than 1 in 4 chance at flipping the seat, and alongside Herschel Walker in Georgia and Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania, Blake Masters is one of the worst Republican nominees this year. And this just goes to show you how lucky Democrats have been in the last few months as the primaries have unfolded. The GOP's poor nomination choices is one of the major reasons why Democrats are doing so well nationwide. If you look at the odds for Mark Kelly, his odds have only continued to go up over the last few months. When this forecast was first released, he only had a 6 in 10 chance at winning. Now he has a greater than 3 in 4 chance at winning his first full term in office, and 538 currently projects a 5-point margin for the Democratic incumbent. I do think that this is going to be slightly higher than the actual result. I think that Mark Kelly, his cap is probably going to be 4%. I do not think he's going to outperform his 2020 margin by that much. The polls right now show him up on average by 8 percentage points. They did overestimate his support in 2020. Same thing for Joe Biden. So I do think Mark Kelly in the end will only win by around half this margin. But if you do look at all the polls released, though, Mark Kelly has been ahead in every single one of them. So polling suggests a very solid re-election for Mark Kelly. Even the most recent Trafalgar Group poll shows Kelly up by 3% against Blake Masters. This is just how poorly Republicans are doing in a state that they controlled for over 2 decades before Joe Biden won it in the 2020 presidential election. So Mark Kelly is in a very strong position going into his re-election. I do agree with the fact that he has a 77% chance at winning. I just don't think the margin is going to be as high as 538 claims. So Arizona is going to be the first likely Democratic state on this map, and Arizona being likely Democratic is going to have a huge impact on this midterm, as Democrats will not have to worry as much about losing this seat. In Colorado, we have an election that is not as competitive as many of the other ones we're going to go over in this video, but in Colorado, Michael Bennet is running for his 3rd full term in office. He was appointed U.S. Senator in 2009 and then proceeded to win re-election in 2010 and 2016. So right now, Michael Bennet has a 90% chance at winning his 3rd term in office. Joe Day only has a 10% chance at flipping this seat. Realistically, though, Michael Bennet is almost guaranteed to win this election. Colorado is not going to go red in 2022. Joe Biden won the state by 13.5% in 2020, and if we look at the Senate election in 2020 as well, John Hickenlooper flipped the state by 9.3% against incumbent Republican Cory Gardner. So Republicans have absolutely no chance in this election. Michael Bennet is a popular incumbent and is currently expected to win by around a 10% margin. Looking at every single poll released, Michael Bennet has been ahead, and on average, he leads by an 8.6% margin. Even the most recent Trafalgar Group poll has Bennet up by a margin of 6%. So Colorado is going to be pretty solid for the Democratic Party, but with a 90% chance at winning, Michael Bennet is only going to be given a likely categorization in his election. And so now we're going to take a look at the 3 races that we have in the upper Midwest: Wisconsin, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. All 3 of these races have become very competitive, even though they should all be pretty easy wins for the Republican Party, especially in Wisconsin and Ohio. So in Wisconsin, Ron Johnson is running for re-election as the incumbent senator for a 3rd term in office. And he has basically been going through a pretty rough month, as his odds of winning his election have gone down drastically in just the last few weeks after Mandela Barnes won the Democratic nomination. So Barnes has now a 49% chance at winning this race. Ron Johnson only has a 51% chance at winning, basically a statistical tie. And according to 538, this is currently the closest election. Ron Johnson is currently projected to win by a smaller margin than any other candidate in any race on the ballot this November. So if we look at the odds for both parties, I mean, just look at it, how significant of a shift there's been. When this forecast was first released, Ron Johnson had a 77% chance at winning his re-election. Wisconsin at the very beginning was a likely Republican state. Now he barely even has any sort of real advantage, and if you look at the margin, Ron Johnson is currently projected to win by a margin of 0.2%, but really this race is too close to call. Mandela Barnes has been doing very well in all the polls. There is no polling average in Wisconsin yet, but Barnes is even ahead in a poll conducted by the Trafalgar Group just a couple of weeks ago. So the Wisconsin race, this race getting closer, should be pretty worrying for the Republican Party, as Wisconsin seemed to be a state that Republicans would pretty easily hold on to for a very long time. If you look at the list of every single Senate election this year based on how competitive they are, Wisconsin now is at the very top of the list. Wisconsin is more competitive than Georgia, Nevada, North Carolina, Ohio, or even Arizona and Pennsylvania, with Ron Johnson currently expected to win by, again, the smallest margin of victory for any candidate in any election this year. So right now, Wisconsin is going to only barely be a tilt Republican state. I think that the numbers will flip in favor of Mandela Barnes in just a couple of days. If you look at this forecast based on polls alone, so the light model of the 538 forecast, we see that Mandela Barnes has a 72% chance at winning Wisconsin Senate elections if we only look at the polls. And if you're curious, Democrats, according to the polls alone, have an 82% chance at maintaining their majority. So going back to the more accurate deluxe model of this forecast, we're going to take a closer look at the election in Ohio between J.D. Vance and Tim Ryan. So if you look at Vance's odds by just face value, 72% chance of winning, that looks pretty good. But if you consider the fact that Ohio has become a very red state in the last couple of years, J.D. Vance is doing pretty terribly. Looking at the 2016 margin, Rob Portman won this same exact seat 6 years ago by 21% against Ted Strickland, and Ted Strickland is the former Democratic governor of Ohio. So against a former governor, Rob Portman won by 21% 6 years ago. If you look at the 2020 presidential election, Trump maintained an 8-point win in Ohio against Joe Biden, and so Ohio should be at least a likely Republican state, or maybe even solid, even though J.D. Vance is the nominee. But Tim Ryan is a 10-time congressman from a district in Ohio, and so that's why he's doing so well in the state right now. If you look at the odds over the last couple of months, I mean, at one point in time, Tim Ryan had a 10% chance at winning the seat. Now he has a pretty good chance. I think that obviously he is still probably not going to win, but I think that he definitely is making an impact on Ohio voters, and he definitely is thwarting the Republicans' plans at winning back the Senate. They have spent over $30 million in the last few months just helping J.D. Vance stay afloat, and if you look at the polling average right now, Tim Ryan is actually ahead and has maintained a lead since the beginning of July. Tim Ryan maintains a 1.9% lead in the polls. However, many of these polls really have not been that great. These Center Street PAC polls, these are online polls, so they really do not mean too much. They do show Tim Ryan ahead, but they should not be weighted at all. If you look at the most recent Trafalgar Group poll, they do have J.D. Vance up by 5%, while the most recent Tim Ryan campaign poll shows him leading by 3%. So I don't really think that Tim Ryan actually has a lead in Ohio right now. Simply, the polls are just not that great, but I do think that this is still very significant that Tim Ryan is doing so well in a state as red as Ohio. If you look at the margin right now, though, predicted for J.D. Vance, he's expected to still win by 5%. However, what's interesting is if you look at Ohio, based on the polls alone, Tim Ryan actually has a 53% chance at winning this race, but according to the more accurate deluxe model, I am going to fill in Ohio as only a lean state for the Republican Party. Next up, in Pennsylvania, we of course have the very high-profile race between John Fetterman and Mehmet Oz. John Fetterman right now has an 80% chance at flipping this seat. This seat is currently held by Republican incumbent Pat Toomey, who won re-election in 2016 against Katie McGinty by 1.4%. This was a surprise win for Pat Toomey. Toomey was behind in the polls, but not as behind as Mehmet Oz is right now. John Fetterman is maintaining an 8-point lead in this election. Even the most recent Trafalgar Group poll shows Fetterman winning by a pretty commanding margin of 5 percentage points, and yes, John Fetterman has led in every single poll for this election. Of course, I never thought that John Fetterman was going to win by double digits. I think he's still probably going to win by under 5, as polls in Pennsylvania have been known to overestimate Democratic candidates. But Mehmet Oz, the main issue for his campaign is that Mehmet Oz has nothing to do with Pennsylvania. He's not from the state, he has never lived in the state, he actually lives in New Jersey, and so he really is only running in Pennsylvania so he can win some sort of political office, after being on TV for over 20 years. So John Fetterman is a pretty good candidate in this race. He's a lieutenant governor serving under Tom Wolf and has been lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania for almost 8 years now. I think he definitely is somebody that can become the next U.S. Senator from the Keystone State, making it so that both Senate seats in Pennsylvania will be held by Democrats, as of course the other seat is held by Bob Casey, who won re-election in 2018 by double digits. If you look at the forecast for this year's race, John Fetterman's odds have gone up significantly in the last few months. At the very beginning of June, John Fetterman only had a 35% chance at winning, but after he won the Democratic nomination and new polls were released showing him up by significant margins, he has taken a very clear advantage in this election and currently is expected to win by a margin just under 6 percentage points. And again, every single poll has shown John Fetterman ahead. So with this flip for the Democratic Party, their chances of winning the Senate overall go up drastically, as of course a flip makes it so the Republicans will have to flip 2 other seats if they want to win 51 seats. So Pennsylvania right now will actually be a likely Democratic state. Pennsylvania's seat currently held by a Republican is more solid for Democrats than Wisconsin and Ohio are for Republicans. And moving on to New England, we only have one major race in the Northeast, and that is the election in New Hampshire between Maggie Hassan and Donald Boldeau. Donald Boldeau has not actually won the Republican nomination. He probably will win on the 13th of September. That's when the Republican nomination for New Hampshire is going to be. New Hampshire is the final state in the nomination process for a midterm year, so this will be the final primary race in just under a week. Donald Boldeau is probably going to win that nomination, and currently he only has a 20% chance at winning. I think that 538 is underestimating Republicans here. I think Hassan's chances of winning are lower than 80%. I don't think she's going to win by a 7-point margin. She only won by, I believe, 0.2% in 2016, but this was a flip for her as she did defeat Republican incumbent Kelly Ayotte. So her victory in 2016, it was the only flip of the year for Democrats, and it was a pretty big deal, as of course Donald Trump did very well in New Hampshire compared to Mitt Romney in 2012 or John McCain in 2008. So right now in New Hampshire, it probably is going to stay blue, but I think that the race is much closer than 538 currently has it as. I don't think that she is anywhere near an 80% chance of winning. I think that right now Pennsylvania and Arizona are more solid for the Democratic Party than the seat that they currently hold in New Hampshire. So I will fill in New Hampshire as likely just based on this forecast, but really in the end, I think that Maggie Hassan is still going to be in a very competitive race. And if you look at the polling for this election, we don't have a polling average yet, but Maggie Hassan has led in basically every single poll against Donald Boldeau. And so now we have just 3 more competitive races left, and these are the elections in North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. So starting off with the race in North Carolina between Ted Budd and Cheri Beasley, North Carolina has become a lean Republican state. Budd only has a 64% chance at winning, which means that Cheri Beasley is very much in this race. If you look at how significant of a shift there has been in the last few months, at one point in time, Ted Budd has an 81% chance at winning his first term in office. So Richard Burr was reelected in 2016 to a second term, but he will not be running re-election a third time in this November. So as of right now, the seat is going to be open, but Richard Burr is probably going to be succeeded by a Republican, even though Democrats are doing surprisingly well in this race. If you look at the polling average, Democrats have actually taken the lead, with Cheri Beasley being ahead by a margin of 1.1%. Many of the most recent polls for this election have shown Cheri Beasley in a pretty good position. The only polls that have really put Ted Budd ahead are polls funded by Republican sponsors. The most recent Frogger poll is a good example of this. They have Ted Budd up by 3%. A Republican pollster showing Budd up by 3% is not that big of a deal, but the main thing here is that Democrats are almost always overestimated in polling numbers, so they almost always underperform expectations, which I still do think that Cheri Beasley is going to lose. If you look at the 2020 Senate election here in North Carolina, Cal Cunningham still lost his election by 1.7%, despite this being what the final spread of polls look like 2 years ago. So according to the forecast right now, I think 538 is going to be pretty accurate. I think a margin under 3% is very likely for Ted Budd. I still think he's going to become the next U.S. Senator from the state, even though Democrats have been doing well in North Carolina in the last few years. Joe Biden was unable to win it in 2020. Democrats are probably not going to make the flip this time in 2022. So North Carolina is going to be a lean Republican state. Even though Republicans are going to win, they're doing surprisingly poorly in this election, just like they are in both Ohio and Wisconsin. Next up, in Georgia, we have the only tilt Democratic state on this map. Right now, Raphael Warnock has only a 52% chance at winning his re-election, but his odds are higher than they have ever been. At one point in time, he only had a 38% chance at winning his first full term in office. He was elected in the special election in 2020, right alongside Mark Kelly, and he did eventually win the race in the runoff in January of 2021, just a day before the insurrection at the Capitol. So Herschel Walker at 48% is really not good for the GOP. This is a state that has only voted twice for a Democrat in a presidential election, going all the way back to 1976 in the election of Jimmy Carter. So if you look at Raphael Warnock's standing right now in Georgia, he is much more popular than Joe Biden and slightly more popular than the other Democratic senator, that being Jon Ossoff, who was also elected in 2021 in the regular Senate election against David Perdue. So right now in the polling, we do see a slight advantage for Warnock if you look at the average here, but the three most recent polls, though, do have Walker ahead by 2 and 1 percentage point. The major thing here is that these are pretty small margins, and one of these polls was conducted by the Trafalgar Group, and them showing Walker up by 1% really means that Warnock is doing slightly better. And polls in Georgia have been known for being very, very accurate. They were very accurate in 2020 and 2021. So a 1.7% lead for Warnock really is a pretty big deal. I think that Warnock is capable of winning re-election, and so even though he only has a 52% chance, if I had to bet on one candidate right now, it would be Raphael Warnock, and so Georgia will be the only tilt state on this map for the Democratic Party. I still think that, though, that it could go both ways, but as of right now, I give Democrats the very slight advantage in the state. And the final election we're going to look at today is the election in Florida between Marco Rubio and Val Demings. Rubio has an 86% chance at defeating his Democratic challenger. Rubio is running for a third term in office. He, of course, won re-election by 7.7 points in 2016 against Patrick Murphy. I think we're going to see a pretty similar race this time around. If you look at the odds for Demings, they have gone up, though. Her odds at one point in time sat at just 6 percentage points. Even though Val Demings is doing better and better in this race, it is very, very unlikely that she ends up winning. Looking at the polls, she's doing surprisingly well, only down by 3.3 points, but I don't think that she's going to come too close. I think Rubio is going to win by a margin similar to his margin in 2016. That, of course, was 7.7%. I do not think, though, that Marco Rubio is going to win by double digits. If you do look at some of the older polls, yes, Rubio was ahead by more than 10%, but every single one of the more recent polls have shown Rubio up by just single-digit margins. So as of right now, Florida is going to be a likely Republican state. I do think Rubio is almost guaranteed to win, but I don't think it's as solid for the GOP as it was just a year ago. And so this is the 2022 Senate map based on the most recent 538 forecast. 51 seats for the Democrats, 49 for the Republicans. Like I've said throughout this video, I don't necessarily agree with some of the ratings, but I do think that this is a pretty reasonable map. I think that it can also be 50-50 if Republicans can flip Georgia, but as of right now, Democrats do have the clear advantage going into the midterms. We are now just 2 months away from the elections in November, and the 530 forecast may give Democrats a 70% chance. And this is also reflective of how people are perceiving these Senate elections. If you look at the betting markets right now, Democrats have a very similar 65% chance at maintaining their majority, while the Republican Party only has a 38% chance at winning. And if you see when these numbers change, it was just a couple of months ago. If you go back to the beginning of June, the GOP had almost an 80% chance at flipping the Senate. But as of right now, Democrats are in a better position than they have ever been in the last 2 years. And so it will make these Senate elections very, very interesting. So thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure you like it down below if you enjoyed it. Comment down below, do you agree with the 530 forecast? Do you think Democrats can actually win 51 seats after November? Subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Consider getting a channel membership for just 99 cents per month to gain extra perks on this channel going into the midterms in November, and I will see you guys in the next video.